So when it comes to the point of sort of the 3-4 years going up to sort of 97, 98, 99, then going beyond that, you're talking about the most formidable football player that you would ever see on a football pitch, the person that everybody in the club wanted to see at the front of the line, bar none. And like I said earlier on today, when he left the club, that was a moment that no one in the football club, in the team, in the dressing room wanted to happen. You know, this idea, you know, Roy, obviously, you know, the perception in terms of what he is as a person, in terms of, you know, everyone thinks about, he said himself, I wasn't ranting and raving all the time. He was popular, incredibly, like, hugely popular, funny. Caring, loving.
I'll get you a lollipop later for that game.
I'm sorry.
Will you hold it for me?
The lollipop.
We'll get back to Gary and Roy in just a quick second, but remember, if you like this video, please like, share and subscribe, and also don't forget to click the notification button so that you know when the next Big D video hits. And also, if you've got something to say, if you want to contribute your thoughts to this channel, please put it in the comments. Even if you think I'm talking rubbish, I don't care. I can take it on the chin. I'm a big boy. Say what you want, but please keep it clean. Anyway, in this clip, Gary Neville is going to be describing in detail his perception of the most inspirational footballer he has ever shared a pitch with, Mr. Roy Keane. And stick around after the clip because I'm going to be sharing my musings about the differences between that generation and the current generation of Manchester United player. Anyway, here's Gary and Roy.
My first experience actually was just of watching him, because I wasn't in the first team squad in obviously the first year that Roy was at the club. Yeah. And thinking about him, actually I remember playing him right back in a game against Sheffield United, I think at Old Trafford, and thinking of, you know, his versatility at the time and his energy and his power and his strength. And I remember Brian Robson saying that he was, you know, this is one hell of a player. And Brian Robson didn't hand out compliments lightly. Right. But obviously, as you then sort of grew into the first team as a young player, you've got to remember at the time there was Robson there was Ince, there was Schmeichel, Cantona, Hughes, Pallister, Bruce. I mean, they were monsters. Every single one of them was a captain, a character, a personality. And Roy at that time probably was younger. I mean, he was younger than those lads, and obviously was a huge personality and character, but it hadn't evolved into what it became at that point, I would say. I think what happened was then obviously over a period of time, over sort of 2 or 3 years, those lads started to leave. And then obviously Roy emerged into the person and individual that he was, which was the most inspirational football player that I ever played with, and the most demanding player that I ever played with, and actually someone who mirrored the boss. He mirrored the boss, simple as that, on the pitch. He was so like him in the sense of not accepting of a drop in standard, not accepting, you know, but I always say a bad pass was a crime, let alone, you know, giving goals away, or, God forbid, not applying yourself or showing a level of professionalism or effort in training or something like that. So when it comes to the point of sort of the 3-4 years going up to sort of 97, 98, 99, then going beyond that, you're talking about the most formidable football player that you would ever see on a football pitch, the person that everybody in the club wanted to see at the front of the line, bar none. And like I said earlier on today, when he left the club, that was a moment that no one in the football club, in the team, in the dressing room wanted to happen. You know, this idea, you know, Roy, obviously, you know, the perception in terms of what he is as a person, in terms of, you know, everyone thinks about, he said himself, I wasn't ranting and raving all the time. He was popular, incredibly, like, hugely popular, funny. Caring, loving.
I'll get you a lollipop later for that game.
I'm sorry.
Will you hold it for me?
The lollipop.
No, so basically you had this person that you essentially see reported on that you actually don't recognise, because you know him in the change room as someone completely different. And to be fair, being with him today, you know, and the people who've been with him today from sort of, you know, from Cadbury's or from, you know, you see the person actually, you see, you know, in that we did a Q&A at lunch today, and you see the individual that he is. But actually, will not accept a drop in standard, will not accept mediocrity in any way, shape or form. And that seems to be a problem for other people, that he has high standards, but it was never a problem for us in our dressing room. Our dressing room, to be fair, responded to it. If other people don't respond to it, it's because they've never seen the standard that he's aspiring to get to. And I always say in life that people think they work hard. Everyone thinks they work hard until you've seen someone work harder, and then you think, okay, I'll go and aspire to that. And then someone thinks, well, he works hard, but then you work harder again, and then you see someone else. And until you've seen a standard, then you never really know where you're at in life, and that's the reality of life. You can only really be what you've seen. And we were very fortunate. I had Roy Keane as a captain, Sir Alex Ferguson as a manager, and surrounded by the likes of, growing up, Brian Kidd, Nobby Stiles, people who just set the most incredibly high standards, and there was never a break in that. And from our point of view as young lads, of course there was an element of talent, and we did well, and we were professional. But we had people who basically guided us and mentored us to a level that we could see and think that's what we were trying to climb to all the time. And I think that would be my take on Roy and his career at United, and sort of his influence upon the club and ourselves.
See, it's interesting watching these clips, and particularly this particular clip from the guys at Off the Ball. Obviously, Gary Neville is talking about Roy Keane, the inspirational captain. And you think about Roy Keane's journey from youth player to becoming the player that he became, which is probably the greatest midfielder in Premier League history. People could talk about Gerrard and Lampard and even Scholes all you want, but I'd take Roy Keane in the centre of the park any day, even now. Roy Keane, prime Roy Keane now would be worth 150 million. You can keep your Jude Bellinghams, you can keep your Kevin De Bruyne's. I would take Roy Keane over anyone. Now, he started his career at Nottingham Forest. Who was his manager at Nottingham Forest? It was the great Brian Clough, who demanded excellence, and he also kept it simple too. He said to Roy Keane, you can pass, you can hold the ball, and you can run, and you can tackle, something along those lines. Just do that. Roy Keane built his entire career on doing that. But there was something else that he learnt along the way. Now, I don't know if this was ingrained in him, or if this is just a personality thing, or if, I don't know, is it one of those two things? Roy Keane always demanded excellence. Now, you can only demand excellence if you yourself are putting the effort in. It all starts with the individual. Are you giving it your all? Now, again, I don't know if Roy Keane was like this when he was younger, or if it's something that was ingrained into him, because I imagine it was a little bit of both. He probably had something within himself, and that was honed with the environment that his footballing educational environment. So he started out at Nottingham Forest with Brian Clough. But also, who was in that dressing room with him? People like Stuart Pearce. And then, as Gary mentions there in the clip, he goes to Manchester United. Who's his manager? It's Alex Ferguson, the Scottish version of Brian Clough, basically, who would go on to, eclipse Brian Clough and what he achieved in a lot of ways. And then also in the dressing room, Bruce Pallister, Mark Hughes, Eric Cantona, Brian Robson. So it's easy for Roy Keane to become the player that he became because he's in an absolute firing furnace of a dressing room there. People that are going to be mentoring him and coaching him and honing him and making sure he does all the right things, which is why it probably would have been better for Gazza if he'd signed for Manchester United, because he'd have had the same thing. Now, I'm not necessarily saying Roy Keane would have gone down the Gazza route. He wouldn't have done. But Roy Keane was lucky to have gone to Manchester United because, fate intervened there because he'd signed for Blackburn. Okay. So, I'm sure some of my viewers are going to be playing games like eFootball and FIFA and all of that. But for the Football Manager players, I just want to sort of highlight something. And that is, it's very difficult in Football Manager to find players who have got the right mentality. You usually have to pay through the nose for them. So all your Football Manager players, you know about, players who are driven, so to speak, or they are model professionals, or they are leaders, or they are model citizens. These are the personalities you want in your team on Football Manager. And as you know, in today's game, it's very hard to find players like that. Okay, now the Big D has just discovered that you can play retro databases on the current FM24, say. Okay, now if there's one thing that I found on this retro database, now I've started the 94-95 season and I've taken over Manchester United, and it is pretty much the squad that Gary Neville's just highlighted there in that clip. So you've got Bruce, you've got Pallister, you've got Cantona, you've got Hughes, you've got Ince, you've got Keane, you've got Neville, you've got Beckham. They're in the reserve team, okay? Now, I've noticed that entire team is filled with players who are model citizens, model professionals, driven, leaders. It's just full of those perfectionists. It's just full of those personality types. Now, you might think, well, yeah, it's Manchester United under Ferguson, fair enough. But I've looked at other players from that same era, and it's the same thing. You find R9 or Zidane or Del Piero or Roberto Baggio, all those guys. They're all perfectionists, highly motivated, determined, leaders, all of that good stuff. And it's weird, and it just got me thinking about the differences in generation. I mean, is that a glitch? Or is that reflective of that time? Because it was a tougher time to be a footballer back then. It was when men were men and the footballers weren't babied and they weren't given too much too soon back then in the 90s compared to now. You've got multi-millionaire footballers now that have maybe played a handful of games in the Premier League, but they're multi-millionaires and they've been on 200 grand a month since they were 16 or something stupid like that. And they've got teams and they've got public relation teams, and they've got entourages and things like that who are shielding them from the outside world. And because of that, they feel entitled and spoiled, and they're not putting the effort in and whatnot. So I just thought it was quite an interesting sort of observation there, because Football Manager is quite accurate for you guys that do play that game. And I'm just wondering, have you players found the same thing? Because you look at Marcus Rashford, for instance, there's absolutely no way he would be behaving, or he would have behaved in the way he has done over the past 2 years had he been in that 94-95 dressing room. There's just no way. And it just highlights the importance of mentorship. So Roy Keane had mentors like Brian Clough, Stuart Pearce. Then he goes to Manchester United. He had Ferguson, he had Bruce, Pallister, Robson. But then Gary Neville also had his dad, who was a hard worker, and he had Roy Keane, he had Cantona, he had Alex Ferguson, he had Bruce, Pallister, Paul Parker, Dennis Irwin. So I relate that back to Manchester United now. And it is nice to see that Ruben Amorim is actually setting a standard. It doesn't matter who you are. These are the standards. You need to rise to these standards or you don't play. And I hope Ineos back him for that. Because the difference between a good manager and a bad one is the players and how hard they work. And it's up to the manager to make sure that he picks the right players and they work hard. So please, let's not jump back on the manager merry-go-round. Let's stick with this guy because he's setting the standard. And it harks back to what Roy Keane and Gary Neville are talking about here. Set the standard, put the effort in, reach those standards, win games, win titles. That's what we want. But what do you guys think? Is there a massive change in the generations between the 90s and now? Of course there are. But is there anything that you've noticed on some of these games, perhaps? Is there anything you've noticed between players now and players back then? You tell me. Thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.